Hi, I'm Jeff Groh and welcome to Gravity. This month is snowboarding. So we're going to take a look at a very dynamic activity coming down the mountain. We're going to break it up into two sections again so that you have a progression of activity so that we can periodize the approach to our training programs and really take a look at the snowboarding as a function. How do you move down the mountain? We're moving in the frontal plane in a direction, but we're using the transverse plane to drive us and turn the board. So when we take a look at some of the injuries that are out there, the CDC reports over 55,000 people receive treatment related to a snowboarding injury. So that's a whole big clump of people. Now, when you take a look at the details of those injuries, you get a lot of head injuries, you get a lot of shoulder injuries, even teeth get knocked out, cervical spine, the acromioclavicular joint gets jacked up, and I have had all of those. So I'm coming to you live with scar tissue and all kinds of stories. So I've both had mild concussions, broken humerus, or broken wrist, all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to try this program before I start snowboarding next time as well. The big component, the big group of people that are in there are children. There's a lot more children that try snowboarding than adults. As a matter of fact, only 10% of that 5 to 15 million people that go up and down the mountains on snowboards a year are over the age of 35. So there's not a giant market, but it is growing. So there are some opportunities for children's programs, for youth programs to get them ready for the preseason or the actual ski season. So our goal is really condition the body to respond better to the environment with functional principles and strategies that will help to avoid some of the falls, some of the trauma-based injuries. Because when you look back at those injuries, most of them are falling back, most of them are catching edges, trauma. Now we're going to try to focus on getting that proximal strength again and being able to avoid those things with a little bit more intrinsic control before we hit the slopes. So we'll start off with the bunny slopes. That's our readiness program, and progress right into the black diamond program, which is going to have more of a progressive functional demand that matches up snowboarding. Today we're going to be talking about snowboarding, and this is the bunny slope version of snowboarding. So it's more of a readiness program to get people kind of set up within that 8 weeks or whatever your preparatory phase is, to get them moving, to get them excited about snowboarding, and to get their bottom-up approach prepared, get their top-down approach prepared in all three planes, of course. So we know with regards to snowboarding that our feet are locked in to this big thingamajig. So we're going to be locked in and we're going to be moving in the frontal plane primarily, but we know that it's a sagittal plane sport. We know it's a transverse plane sport, and of course there is going to be some frontal plane stability, especially when you get into fancy jumps and the hops and the ollies or whatever the guys are calling it these days. When people are snowboarding, hopefully they have a low center of gravity, especially if it's their first time. They want to be low to the ground, just like babies when they learn how to walk and talk, right? They want to keep their arms up. So we're going to start with a low center of gravity so that we create this kind of dampening. So we're going to be able to absorb force in the sagittal plane, in the frontal plane, and then be able to move that force with the transverse plane. So we're going to have these pre-positioned joints. We know that we're going to need some lengthening in the lower calf. We're going to need some lengthening in the hips, and just get them ready to be able to fire up their proprioceptors, to be able to turn all the muscles from the calves all the way up to the shoulders to absorb the force and to be able to basically turn and stop, kind of the most important parts of snowboarding. Now, when we talk about drivers, we know that when you turn in snowboarding, a lot of it's done with the arms. Maybe you drive the arms in the transverse plane to be able to drive the pelvis in the transverse plane, to be able to turn the hips, the legs, and be able to get that board to turn. Other times you're going to be snapping the hip forward to be able to stop. So whatever the strategies are, there's going to be strategies from the bottom up and the top down, meaning we're going to be able to turn the snowboard either with our arms and shoulders and trunk, or we can get real nasty with the hips and kind of whip them around and get that stopped. So we're going to look at some preparatory movements for that as well. So our strategies are really to prepare the client for the loading that's going to appear with snowboarding, with some of that dampening to be able to absorb force in all three planes of motion, and to really dial in this on the bunny slopes on the lower extremity. So we're really going to dial in on the lower calf, or the calf itself, in that pre-position phase so that they can be ready to turn the board or be able to absorb the force. If you go on YouTube and watch snowboarding and just look some of the basic movements, I know that some of you are experts in snowboarding out there, so this is just a thought process to get you started, and I know you can build on this and make it a lot better, especially if you've got that great experience. So if you look at a basic drill for snowboarding, you see them what's called toe sliding. So they're able to kind of back up on their heels, get that blade to sink down into the snow so that they can brake and stop, so they don't go overhead and catch that edge. So you're going to get some nice sagittal plane dorsiflexion, plantar flexion in the program just to get them stimulated, get the proprioceptors turned on, and get them ready to rock and roll. So the other strategies are going to be, of course, to incorporate top-down and bottom-up drivers. So we'll get pre-positioned joints, we'll add something in with regards to a leg movement or an arm movement just to help the whole system move through or connect together and work as a single unit in order to achieve the task. So we're going to bring in Nicole now. Nicole's here with her Snow Bunny suit on, looking good.
Hey, Snow Bunny suit.
And what we're going to do is get started. We talked about a real dynamic type of cardio pull warm-up in the first ski series. So if you go to the ski bunny slopes, you'll see a little bit more of an expanded view of this warm-up. We're just going to chat about it today. So we really have what's called a dynamic warm-up first, and now we're going to go into some more specific. So so the client starts to look, feel, and smell like snowboarding, right? Whatever that means. So what we're going to do is get Nicole set up into what's called a plyometric squat, and we've already gone through a cardio pull warm-up, but now we're going to go into some movements where it looks more like snowboarding. So what we're going to do is, this is the board. Her feet are going to go into kind of a snowboarding position where the right leg's up, the left leg's down, and one of them's internally rotated, the other's externally rotated. And she's just going to alternate back and forth. And this is basically just, again, to turn on the proprioceptors, to get those muscles lengthening, to get the nervous system fired up, and also to help them understand, hey, we're doing sport specific here. It should look and taste and smell or whatever you want to do with regards to snowboarding. So there's a lot of ways to add variations to this with regards to speed or load. If I want to just add a little more of a deceleration phase or an eccentric challenge, I can just throw my hand down there. It doesn't take a lot to add a lot of momentum of mass, one of the principles of functional exercise with regards to gravity and momentum, so that she starts to get warmed up. Or I can have a medicine ball, put it in her hand, weights, anything that you've got around. And medicine balls are great because you can start to drive the upper body as well. So we've got those, what they're called plyo squats, kind of twisting back and forth. And now what we want to do is, I talked about those toe slides where we're going to get the heels and the toes driving, get the front of the leg warmed up, the lower leg warmed up. So what we do is we position her heel all the way at the top of the squat stand and really just let the toe go way far in so you get a nice stretch to the anterior tib, some of the anterior musculature, and then drive it back with those same muscles. So you're getting some nice lengthening and strengthening back and forth. If you've never done this before, you really have to try it to understand it, but you'll feel those specific muscles warming up. So it's a nice little variation. Other things that you can do, or you can take an AirX pad. I won't put it on today, but you can put an AirX pad on there and just, well, let's try it. Why not? We're here, huh? So I'm going to put it all the way down at the bottom. This is dynamic training right here. And that's just going to give you a little more like instability at the ankle joint. So now she's got to be a little more stable in the calcaneus area, the whole foot. And what's nice about when you create an unstable environment is, what's reported in the research is that the body will become stiffer. So the more soft your environment is, or uncontrolled environment, the more stiff your body will get to compensate for that. If you land on concrete, your body's kind of squishy and spongy, so it knows how to do it. It doesn't have to be real stable. Nice work. So you've obviously got bilateral variations, unilateral variations, and we're going to keep with the theme of the lower extremities. We're going to turn Nicole over on her side. And this is really to get into some of those, the perineal muscles, some of the muscles of the lower leg that are going to help too, that they got these real nice long tendons that shoot under the foot, attach up into the toes, so that we're going to turn those on as well. So what we're going to do is take her foot and scoot it way back to the back. So if they're looking this way, we're going to go all the way up to the front top position or back top position. So it looks kind of goofy from here, from there, it might look okay. But what she's going to do is start to hop and really focus on landing right in this area here, because what that's going to do is really lengthen the lower calf muscles. It gets the hips and knees fired up as well. And you've got a nice active abductor on the hip here to be able to hold the weight of the leg up the entire time. So that's going to help with some of that frontal plane stability back and forth on the snowboard. So that's a fun one. Again, with the tweaks, higher jumps, faster jumps, do it for time, throw weights on them, do whatever you can do to tweak it and make it either easier or more difficult for that particular client. Now we're going to go right into a prone exercise and still really dial in on this lower leg. And this is kind of a fun one too, because this is going to go more into, we're going into dorsiflexion when the ankle bends, which is going to turn on the plantar flexors. So what we're going to do is pre-position her knees. What they are is kind of a nice angle here. We'll be able to get into a little different muscle group, and she'll just go into some heel raises here. And this is nice for torque. If you look at some of those, at the research with stability and strength, if you do a crunch on a ball versus the floor or a bench, you're not going to have as much torque on the ball. Now, that's where you kind of got to weigh your options with regards to the client, their abilities and whatnot, and match it up to it. However, if you're really going into the strength component, you've got to get a little bit more torque on the joint, and this is going to create that. Her knees are locked into the board, and if she wanted to go a little harder, we could go unilateral. And I can also, again, it's so beneficial to move that foot around. So I might take her foot and put it back up here in the top corner. Just little tweaks. So it can be up here. You get real nice flexion of the ankles and the feet. You go anywhere on this squat stand, and you can also shift it up and down. Remember, it's telescoping, and just hit all the different little muscles. There's so many cool little muscles that go up and attach into the tibia, all the way up into the femur. And they all need to be stimulated so that they're appropriately stimulated when they get out to the snow hills. Snow hills, is that what it's called? The alpine slopes. Okay, so we've got our lower extremities fired up, and now we're going to go into some of the upper extremities. So we're going to go into trunk rotation. We know that there's top-down drivers that occur with there, and you'll see as we build up to the black diamond, the next program, we'll start adding unilateral variations. Now we're going to start with some basic trunk rotations, and I know you all know trunk rotation, so we're going to try to tweak it and make it a little more interesting. So what I'm going to have you do is we're going to grab this first handle, and again, I'm going to do the old, why don't you kneel on it first trick, and you may have your own strategy there as well. You can hand them the handle first, but I like to do this because I know that they're stable. I know that I can see a nice wide base of support, and I like to trick them and say, hey, I'm really going to yank on this thing, and they should lower their center of gravity and get more stable. So she's got the handles. We've got the our friends over at the Miramar Air Stationing flyby, protecting our country, so just pardon the C-5 gigantic aircraft going by. And what we're going to start with is a low kneeling version of this. And we're going to do like a post-rehab type of version. So she's going to pull the elbows in, shorten the lever length. And now what we've done is we've put her in a forward flexed position. This is nice because it loads the lumbar spine. It loads the entire body from the hips up. And then we go into trunk rotation. So she'll just do a small rotation. If you've gone to post-rehab course, this is called, I think, rock the baby or some fancy name like that, these medical terms that they use. So we can start here, and then we can go all the way up. You can imagine that you've got these different variations. She comes up to a high kneeling variation, and then obviously can lengthen the lever out. We look for that nice triangle between the arms, good strong flat wrists, and then we can add in variations with the inclines, declines, and everything in between. So these are fun, and another way to kind of tweak this is to tweak the lower body. So what we're going to do is just pre-position her knees so that they're positioned either in a right knee forward or a left knee forward. And that's going to just throw the body off a little bit, throws all the proprioceptors off that they have got to readjust and think, just like if you're coming down the mountain, it's not going to be a real nice symmetrical type of move. You've got all these forces and everything's coming at them. Now I might do stuff like launch tennis balls at her or something, some type of deviations so we could stimulate or simulate like a branch coming at her, or she'd have to avoid a tree. Maybe I just run by her and just act like a tree. You can put your arms up in there, make it fun, whatever you want to do. And then maybe we'll do a couple with the right knee forward. So I'm just blocking my foot on the lower rail, and then she does that same thing. So we've kind of gone through what's called a sagittal plane tweak with the knees, and then I'll just discuss it. We don't need to try because I know she's getting tired, is that we can also go frontal plane tweak by narrowing the knees. And when you do that, you're going to create a much more unstable environment. So then you have to really be careful, make sure that they're stable, because the moment they start to lean one way or the other, they're going to go down. And which is a nice little segue into one of the most important things of snowboarding, is to wear your helmet. Head injuries are really the leading cause of injury with regards to snowboarding, along with wrists and knees and all kinds of tweaky stuff. So we're all set there. That's kind of a bunny hill variation or introduction to snowboarding. Remember, take a look at the sport. Get on YouTube, get on any of the tools that you can use, and use that slow motion. Take a look at what plane joints are moving in. Take a look at what's driving the movement, whether it's the lower extremity, upper extremity, and you'll find some really cool stuff out there where people are almost, parallel to the ground, where they're doing these fancy moves, and you get into some of the super duper, what are they, half pipes and big jumps. Then you have to really break it down, but you can look and identify in all three planes what each joint's doing. Figure out what it is that's coming, if it's coming from the bottom up or the top down, and just apply it to the GTS. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Gravity this season.